Has anybody in here ever felt unqualified to do what God's called you to do? Has anybody, by a show of hands, ever felt unqualified to do something that God laid on your heart? I feel unqualified every day I wake up. I'm just being real. Have you ever felt as if your weakness kind of stopped you from being able to do what God wanted you to do? Now, I'm just going to go ahead and state a fact before we go any further. Everybody in this room and everybody watching online has weakness. We all have weakness. It does not matter if you're a believer in Jesus. It doesn't matter if you don't believe in Jesus. It doesn't matter if you've attended church your whole life. It doesn't matter if today's your first day stepping through the doors of a church. We all have weakness. We all have failures. We all have mistakes. We all have shortcomings. We all have things that we wish that we could go back and change. And it's hard to push past those weaknesses because the enemy is so good at reminding us of our weakness whenever he sees us getting stronger. Whenever he sees us saying, I'm not staying where I'm at, but I'm going where God's trying to take me. Whenever he sees us saying, I'm not staying in this addiction, but I'm moving beyond this. Whenever he sees us getting stronger, he reminds us of our weakness. He reminds us, you said that before. You said it wouldn't always be this way before, but it's still this way. You said that you would never do that again before, but you just did it. He constantly is able to remind us of our weakness. And people like to say, whenever the devil reminds you of your past, remind him of his future. This is a very popular saying. I love this saying because it's true. If he reminds you of your past, remind him of his future, it's awesome. But here's the reality. It's not always that easy. What if my weakness is not just something from my past? What if my weakness is something that I am facing on a daily basis now? What if my weakness is something that I thought that once I accepted Christ into my life and started following him, that it would go away, but then I woke up the next day and realized I still had the same problems? What if my current reality is littered with weaknesses that I don't know what to do with? But the great thing about God is that he made a habit of using broken people to do big things. God made a habit all throughout Scripture, and I've seen it all throughout my life, of using people that should not have been able to do what they were doing to do the very thing that he created them to do. So for this week of Selah, peace in the midst of chaos, I want to talk about our chaos of weaknesses, and I want to subtitle the message, Embrace It to Replace It. Embrace it to replace it. Let's pray. God, I thank you this morning just for what you've already done. But God, I thank you that you aren't going to stop there, but that you are taking us to another level. God, I pray that you would speak to every person in this room, every person watching online, that you would just be so real and evident to them, that you would speak directly to them, that they would hear exactly what they need to hear from you. God, I pray that you would put me on like a coat and wear me this morning. Use me to do what only you can do, because I know I cannot do it on my own, and I thank you for it. In Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Amen. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been given a gift that you didn't know what to do with? Anybody ever received a gift and you have no idea how to handle it, how to care for it, what to do with it? This happened to my mom back on Mother's Day. She was given an orchid by I think it was actually Johnny and Natalie, gave her an orchid. And listen, I love my mom, okay? And she was excited because this orchid is not supposed to be able to be killed. See, I didn't even know what an orchid was. But it's a flower and it blooms and it's supposed to be really pretty when it blooms. It's not supposed to be able to die. And so she got this orchid and she was all excited. Now, I love my mom and she's amazing at a lot of things. She's amazing. Listen, moms are awesome. But I have never in my life seen a plant come into her possession and live. It just hasn't happened. In 27 years of life, and I'm not making this up, this is as honest as I can be, I have never seen her get a gift of a plant or go and purchase a plant and it survive her care. In 27 years. But she loves taking care of plants. And this was a gift, so she held it dear to her, and she was so excited because this thing's not supposed to be able to die. So she's like, I finally found the plant that can survive my lifestyle. You know how we all have that one thing that we love to do, even though we're really bad at it? Can anybody relate? Anybody got something in your life that you love to do? I'm just going to drop one. Singing. Singing. You love to sing, but you cannot do it. Some of us, it's playing an instrument. We just want to make a joyful noise, and it's only joyful to us. I don't even know if God thinks it's joyful. I mean, he's thankful for it, but we all have that thing that we like to do that we're not really good at. For Mom, this is taking care of plants. This is raising plants. This is kind of her thing. But she was excited about it, and she started trying to take care of it, and she put it on her nightstand in her bedroom. Now, when I came over a couple days later, she had put it into the sunroom. And I noticed something about the plant. When I saw it a couple days before, it had about 3 or 4 blooms on it. Now I only saw 2. So I asked her, I said, Mom, you know, what's going on with the plant? I noticed that you moved it into the sunroom. And she said, well, you know, man, Dustin, you're never going to believe this. This plant, I don't think it was getting enough sun because it lost a flower. So I moved it into the sunroom so it could get more sun. Now that sounds like a great idea until you do a little research and find that orchids do not do well in direct sunlight. That's why they're not easily killed, because they're supposed to be able to survive anywhere. And so a couple days passed, and I came over to their house, and the orchid was in the kitchen. And I said, Mom, what happened to the orchid? Now we're down to 1. You ever seen Beauty and the Beast? You know how there's a rose in Beauty and the Beast, and every time you see it, it's losing a petal? It's about how I felt. And I said, Mom, what happened to your plant? And she said, well, you know, it turns out that they don't do very well in sun. And I'm like, right, so the sun's the problem here. And so then I learned that I've really become pastoral, having been in full-time ministry for 7 years, because I got pastoral with my mom, right? And don't ever do that. But I said, you know, Mom, God's given each of us different gifts. God's given each of us different callings. And I don't know, maybe the plant scenario is not for you. And she gave me this look, and she said, I'm going to act like you didn't say that, and I'm going to fix this plant. So she got on Facebook, and she posted, and she said, I got an orchid that's dying. I don't normally do this. It's an emergency. Can somebody tell me how to save this thing? And she got about 30 comments, and she didn't do one single one of them. I think she was so confused by all the options that she had. And so a couple days later, we were at lunch with this lady, and she let her know that she was a bit of a horticultural specialist. That's a big word for the day. That means she knows how to handle plants. And so she said, you know, I love taking care of plants. And she said, and orchids are my favorite. And Mom looked over at me, and she's like, there's my ram in the bush, boy. Of course, she didn't say it quite like that, but that's how it went through my head. And so this lady proceeded to tell her, she said, because Mom said the orchid's dead, it's dying. You know, I've tried everything. And she said, you know what? She said, it's not dead. It's not. She said, in a couple months, if you'll just leave it alone and put it in a room, in a couple months, it's going to bloom again. Now, the next thing she said, though, is what stood out to me the most. She said, even though it looks dead, you just put it there, it's going to be fine. But then she said this. She said, but make sure you keep watering it. Yeah. See, Mom had already stopped watering the plant. She had given up hope. And if she would have never watered it again, it surely would have died. But because she now knew that there was potential for life in the orchid, she's going to water it every day until she sees some growth. Here's the question I want to propose for everybody in this place today. What thing in your life have you stopped watering because you thought that it was dead? What thing in your life have you given up on because you thought that your weakness had killed it? What dream, what vision, what hope, what purpose were you believing God for, but you've given up hope because you thought that you weren't good enough? Because you weren't seeing any fruit, and the enemy's told you that it's because you're never going to make it. Well, you know, I thought that I would make a great spouse and get married someday. I believed it. But now I'm starting to wonder if I'll ever find anybody who can put up with my attitude. Too real? I thought that I'd have children one day and have a great family. But now I'm starting to feel as if I'm not even responsible enough to take care of myself. I thought that maybe I would have a great business one day, but now I can't even keep a regular job. Just because you're weak in an area, it does not mean that your purpose is dead. But you have to remain consistent. Even though it may be a struggle, you have to remain consistent. Paul said in verse number 11, he said, such people should realize that what we are in our letters when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we are present. First thing I want you to see this morning is consistency. Consistency. Paul said, this is not just something that we're saying or writing, it's something that we're going to back up with our actions. It's something that you are going to see when you meet us. This is not just something that we do every once in a while. This is a daily habit. We are consistent in this thing. Side note, many of us become frustrated because we feel as if God is not giving us any direction in our lives. Many of us become frustrated because we don't know the next step to take. We don't know what we're supposed to do next. And we feel as if God's left us, but the only way to truly know where you're supposed to go is by the leading of the Spirit. And the only way to be led by the Spirit is for it to be consistent. You cannot live a life led by the Spirit when you only acknowledge His presence once a week when you come to church. It takes consistency. It takes consistency. See, we know that consistency is important to achieve anything great. If you want to achieve anything at all, you have to remain consistent. It's never easy to achieve anything worthwhile without consistency. That's why the greatest athletes are what? Consistent. They're consistent in practice, but they're also consistent in the game. In that even if they are having an off night, they keep shooting. Why? Because they know that if they never take another shot, they're never going to score. You have to remain consistent in the good and the bad, when it's easy, when it's hard, you have to remain consistent. See, the thing about God is that He requires us to be consistent in the areas where we're weakest. God requires the greatest consistency in the areas where we struggle the most. That area of your life that you thought, was no big deal because it's a struggle, so you're just going to leave it be. That's the area that God requires the most consistency. Because it's in those moments that God is able to do the greatest work. It's in the moments of your greatest weakness that God is able to apply the greatest strength. It's in the moments where you feel as if you keep failing. The moments where you feel as if you're never going to make it through. The moments as if you feel you're never going to get the answer. As if everybody is telling you to give up hope and to stop. That's the moments where you have to remain the most consistent. Because those are the moments that God does the greatest work. But too many of us miss out on the potential of what God is wanting to do because we give up in the weakness instead of remaining consistent. We give up whenever it's hard instead of remaining consistent. And the enemy is so good, the devil's so good at this. He will tell you that you're going to fail by reminding you of your past weakness, of your past failures, of the times you tried before and didn't make it work, of the times you thought it would happen before and it didn't happen. The enemy will remind you of all these things and all your past failures that you've been through and tell you that you're never going to make it. That's why Revelation 12:10 calls him the accuser. Because his job is to consistently remind you of your past and all the times you failed before and all the reasons that you cannot do it and all the reasons that you're never going to make it. Some of you have stopped doing things God wanted you to do and saying that it's because God didn't want you to do it. It wasn't God telling you not to do it. It was the enemy telling you not to do it, telling you weren't good enough to fulfill what God wanted you to do. Because the enemy knows that if he can cause you to feel weak enough and stop what God's purpose is for your life, that he can defeat you in the process. So the enemy's constantly trying to remind you of reasons that you're not qualified, of reasons that you're inadequate, of reasons that you don't have what it takes, of reasons that you're too messed up. And he's so good at this that he will convince you that you are going to fail before you ever even try. He will tell you that you are about to fail before you ever even give it another shot. A couple weeks ago, I saw this video from a college baseball game. Any baseball fans in here? 3. Cool. Awesome. Well, you're fixing to see a baseball video. And I saw this video, and I'll kind of explain it since there's like 3 people in here who like baseball. Maybe none of y'all know about baseball or what happens. As a pitcher, the goal is to throw 3 strikes, right? 3 strikes and you're out. You've heard that before if you're a parent. But if you throw 4 balls, then it's a walk, and the person gets to go to first base. What you never want to do is throw 4 straight balls, because that's when you let people kind of know they're in your head, and it's just not good. So you don't want to throw 4 straight balls. And then this college game at Texas A&M, they have this ritual that they do. When a pitcher throws 4 straight balls to walk a batter, they carry on and something after that. And I want you to see in this video this young man who was pitching for Texas Christian University, TCU. He threw 4 straight balls to the batter. And I want you to see how the crowd responded.
And now something special here at Texas A&M as the entire student section, the 12th man, and everybody else starts chanting ball 5 after a 4-pitch walk. They'll continue with every subsequent pitch, and they can rattle an opposing pitcher. A young man from Minnesota missed with 11 consecutive pitches before giving up a game-winning triple. Michael Barish is the batter, Burke at first. College baseball.
And home field advantage doesn't matter. You hear every one of those when you're standing out there.
Now, he failed 7 times. And every time that he failed, there was a roar that came up out of the crowd, not only reminding him that he had just failed, but telling him that he was about to fail again. When he threw ball 4, they started chanting ball 5. When he threw ball 5, they started chanting ball 6. When he threw ball 6, they started chanting ball 7. When he threw ball 7, they started chanting ball 8. But here's the thing. He remained consistent, and he kept throwing, and eventually he threw a strike. I came to tell somebody today, God never asked you to be perfect, but he requires you to be consistent. God never told you that you would never fail, but he promised you that his strength was made perfect in your weakness, that his grace was sufficient for your weakness. And I dare somebody in this place, the next time that the enemy tries to tell you to give up and to quit because you keep failing, I dare somebody to stand up and to do it again, to look at the enemy in the face and to do it again, to do the very thing that God has told you to do again. And if you fail then, you do it again. And if you fail then, you do it again. Keep doing what God's told you to do. He never asked you to be perfect. He asked you to be consistent. He asked you to remain on the course and to do what he's called you to do, no matter what it may look like. You got to remain consistent. Next thing I want you to see this morning is that you got to stay in your lane. You got to stay in your lane. Verse number 13. It says, we, however, will not boast beyond proper limits, but will confine our boasting to the sphere of service God himself has assigned to us. God himself has assigned to us. Now, I want you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to say is going to set some people free. God will never hold you accountable for someone else's assignment. God will never hold you accountable for someone else's assignment. See, what happens a lot of times is our weakness gets magnified because we're trying to live out somebody else's purpose. Our weakness gets magnified because we're not even doing what we're created to do and what we're called to do. And we're trying to fulfill someone else's assignment. But you have to stay in your lane. You have to focus on the assignment and the calling that God has given to you. Not to your kids. Ouch. Not even the assignment that God has given your spouse. Not the assignment that God's given somebody else that you always wish that you could be. The assignment and the purpose and the calling that God has given to you. The one that he's given to you. You got to look ahead to what God is wanting to do in your life. You got to look ahead to what God is wanting to fulfill in your life. And the best way to get a glimpse into where God is taking you is to find the clues and the places that you've been. Not the places everybody else has been. We're always comparing our stories, and we feel as if our story doesn't measure up, but that's because their story is not your story. It's about where you've been and where God's trying to take you. Our greatest disappointments, our greatest pain come in the moments that we are trying to live out somebody else's purpose that God never empowered or gifted or called you to be. God will never empower you to do something that he has not gifted you to do. And the enemy knows that he can never take away your purpose. He can never take away your gifting. He can never take away the calling that he's given you. The enemy knows that. So he tries to get you to focus on somebody else's so that it devalues your calling in your eyes, so that it devalues your gifting in your eyes. And he does this by trying to get us to compare ourselves to everybody else. Listen, when I first started preaching, probably for 6 different times I preached, I was 6 different pastors. I'm just being real. I was 6 different pastors every time I preached. Anybody who was here about 5-6 years ago, you know. It was like, what is Dustin going to be today? Is he going to be screaming? Is he going to be laughing? Is he going to be talking? What's it going to be? And it took me that long before God finally said, Dustin, what are you doing? See, I was trying to be who I thought people wanted me to be, but I finally had to see that God just wanted me to be who he had gifted me to be. That's why when you hear me preach, it's not sounding like somebody else. It's going to sound like Dustin. Whatever it is that God's called you to do, stop looking at everybody else trying to be like everybody else and just be who he's called you to be. Be who he has gifted you to be. The only way to find peace in your weakness is to focus on your assignment. Stop focusing on everybody else's. You have time for one more scripture. 2 Corinthians chapter 12. You have time? Just one more? One more. It's actually 3 verses, but I got the microphone and I'm going to read them anyways. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 8 through 10. Paul is talking here still, and he's talking about something that he calls a thorn in his flesh. We hear about this a lot in church. He has this thorn in his flesh. He never says what it is. He never says what his struggle is, and I'm thankful. Because if he had named it, we probably wouldn't have felt like we could relate. But the fact that he just called it a thorn and a weakness and a struggle lets everybody in this room imagine whatever it is, whatever your weakness is, whatever your struggle is, whatever your thorn in your flesh that you wake up in the morning and you're like, my God, are you ever going to take it away? That's the thing Paul was referring to. Paul, who wrote a large portion of the New Testament. He was a leader in the faith, and he had a thorn that he could not get rid of. He had a weakness that he was never able to master. And he penned these words in verse number 8. He said, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why for Christ's sake I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. The only way to find peace in the midst of your weakness is to embrace it. The last thing I want you to see this morning is you have to embrace it. If you don't do this, then it results in us trying to earn what God has freely given. It results in us trying to earn what God has freely provided to us. It's not about us doing more to earn what God has. It's about giving God greater access to come in and bring a change. Because it's only when he does something in us that he can do something through us. It's only when we relinquish control and say, God, I can't do it on my own. I don't have the answers. I've been trying, and I know that I relied on you for a little bit, and I know that I trusted in you for a little bit, but now I'm back here on my own, trusting in myself. And God, I got to get back to the place where I replace my weakness with your perfect strength. When I am weak, I am strong. Not when I have it all figured out. Not when I have all the answers and everything's going the way that I planned for it to go. Not when I'm able to live like somebody else is living at their level and doing what they're doing. But in the moments of my dysfunction, in the moments of my insecurity, in the moments of my pain, in the moments of my setback, in the moments of my struggle and my greatest weakness, these are the moments in my greatest weakness that we are able to see the perfect strength of Jesus. When I'm at my weakest, I'm at my strongest. And you know, God reminded me this week about a moment that Jesus was weak. You say Jesus was never weak. No, he never sinned. He never did anything like that. But he had one moment that everybody viewed him to be weak. And it was when he was residing on the cross and he breathed his final breath and he said, "It is finished." And he died. Now in that moment, everybody counted him out. That was the weakest moment for Jesus. But let me tell you what happened in that moment. That moment of weakness created the greatest miracle that ever took place on this earth. Because it was in that moment of weakness for Jesus that he made a way for each and every one of us from death to life, from brokenness to wholeness, from sickness to health, from sorrow to joy, from weakness to strength. I may be weak, but I'm rejoicing in my weakness because I'm embracing it, and I'm going to replace it with the perfect strength that can only be found in Jesus Christ. Would you stand with me, please?